Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A warm welcome to Muslima Insight with me, your host, Adila Ahmad, for the next hour or so. In today's program, we are going to look at the philosophy, the advantages, as well as the methods and some technical aspects of homeschooling. And with us in studio is a gentleman by the name of Siraj Gur, who is going to share with us his expertise in this field. He is not only the owner of a publishing company called Knowledge First Media, he is also the founder and the director of EduSpaces, which is a support center for homeschoolers. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Shiraz.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah for coming through. We really appreciate it, Shiraz. Shiraz, in looking at the topic of education, we know that within South Africa, we've got our public schools, we've got our Model C schools, we also have private schools, which in today's times very difficult to afford for many. And then we come with the option of homeschooling. Now, can you share with us, the viewers and myself, what brought you to this point of opening up and starting this homeschooling support center? What motivated you?
I don't know. I actually have always had a passion for education. Okay. When I look back at my school days, I always remember helping my fellow students, peers, tutoring them with their work. And I never said no to these people, to my friends, because I enjoyed it all. I enjoyed helping them. Okay. And although I drifted off course for many years, I did a BCom degree, I was in a family business, I did go back into the education field when I, with other committee members, began a Muslim school when I was living in Mafeking. Okay. And then after a few years, we began to homeschool our own kids, which was done mostly by my wife, although I was fascinated by the whole idea of homeschooling and education, and especially alternative models of homeschooling, of education for that matter, be it homeschooling, Montessori, Waldorf. And I began to read up about these things. And then when I moved to Johannesburg, I actually began to sell educational books, publish them, as well as import and distribute them. And then I chose to then last year do a PGCE, which is a diploma in education. And now I feel that I want to support other parents in their homeschool journey because it's something which I have a passion for.
I believe that from what I understand in our pre-discussions that you have obviously successfully homeschooled. Your first son is at Tux.
Yes.
And your other son is in matric at this moment. What spurred you on from the time that you say you were in Mafeking and your wife said she's going to homeschool the children? What made you choose that option? Anything in particular that comes to the memory?
It was actually a very interesting way in which we stumbled across homeschooling. Okay. We actually were running a Muslim school in Mafeking. Okay. And but just before that, our eldest son moved school 4 times by the time he was in grade 3. Sure. Because we were not happy with something or the other about the school. And then it just so happened that Brother Idris Kamisa, who was consulting with us, consulting at the Muslim school, he sent us a book about homeschooling. It was written amongst others by the main author was Brother Hamza Yusuf Hansen. And that book sort of convinced us to start homeschooling. And it just so happened that as we began, my wife felt like giving up quite a few times, but I was sort of spurring her on, and for me it was the way to go, because I felt that the school system doesn't serve our learners, unfortunately.
Now, in listening to what you are saying, there were some challenges that your wife obviously went through during that time. For the sake of the views that's out there, there are certain challenges. And alhamdulillah, your wife did overcome it. Coming back to to the motivation of starting the support center, what are some of the objectives, some of the mission that you want to achieve by providing this service to homeschoolers?
What I want to achieve is to help every learner who comes to my center to achieve his or her dreams.
Okay.
And to achieve that, we have to look at each child individually and see what their needs are and what their abilities are. Mm-hmm. And we actually have to let the child direct his or her education. Mm-hmm. It is not a formal school where the children are given incentives to perform. By incentives, I mean by given high marks or given stars, or sometimes to avoid punishment or detention. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My aim is to ensure that every child who comes to my center has that inner flame burning, mm-hmm. that inner flame to pursue knowledge. And I would like to support them in their journey and support them to achieve their goals later in life.
Can I ask you, in what you have said, when you say you look at each individual child and their abilities, is there a certain method or formula that you use to see, for example, I know in many of the mainstream schools, those who do math and science, they are regarded as the brainy ones, the clever ones, and yet those who are more artistic with more linguistic skills, or in the classical arts, they are sort of regarded as half less important. How do you, in homeschooling, regard that, and how do you determine which aptitudes, because we talk about whole brain development, the 4 quadrants of the brain, that each person has got their own particular field where they're going to be better at. How do you determine that? Can you determine that?
There are various tools which we can use. Children can be assessed by various testing modalities. Mm-hmm. The most famous one being Kobus Neethling, where he has a website and they have online tools to actually assess children. Okay. And also, we would work with the kids, observe them, mm-hmm. and see where the interests lie.
Of course.
I believe that every child is gifted in one way or another.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, this giftedness is denied in our schooling system. Mm-hmm. And I feel if we let the child direct his own education, mm-hmm. then these gifts will come out sooner or later. Mm-hmm. But we need to give it to the child to give it to us. And of course, they can do aptitude tests, and those will also give us indications of where the interests lie.
Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, you try to foster that inherent gift or talent that child has, and you grow that talent to its optimum state, so that obviously when the child qualifies with homeschooling, they are integrated as a whole human being, proud of who they are. Is that correct?
Yes. Obviously, I can't grow it for the child. I can provide the environment for him mm-hmm. to grow it. But that internal growth will come from the child.
Mm-hmm. Of course, absolutely. And coming to the topic itself now of homeschooling, where does this philosophy come from? And what is the philosophy of homeschooling?
As I've mentioned just now, that we believe that every child is gifted mm-hmm. in one way or another. And if we can recognize those gifts mm-hmm. and those abilities of the child and nurture them, and then we can assist the child to grow up into a whole human being. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Speaking about a whole human being, we need to nurture the child not only in terms of his academics, mm-hmm. but also in terms of his character.
Absolutely important.
In terms of his integrity, in terms of building up his maturity. Because I believe that if a child has good character and he has the academic skills, mm-hmm. once you have both, and then he can hopefully exercise good judgment in his life, mm-hmm. and also to achieve wisdom, inshallah.
Inshallah. Also, what I would like to know, is homeschooling legal?
Yes, absolutely. Homeschooling has been legal since 1996 as per the SA Schools Act.
Oh, that is fantastic to know, especially for our viewers, ease of mind that they know it's a process that they can safely engage into. On that note, it's time for us to take a break. Don't go away. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A warm welcome back to Muslima Insight. In today's program, we are delving into the topic called homeschooling. And with me in studio, I've got Mr. Siraj Gur, who is sharing with us his expertise in the field. Shiraz, before the break, we were looking at the legalities of homeschooling. And it takes me back to the question of what we were discussing before that, which was the philosophy of homeschooling. And the question arises, what are mainstream schools criticized for by homeschoolers?
Homeschoolers criticize mainstream schools for mainly the reason that schools tend to box children. Mm-hmm. They want them to all the whole class to perform at the same level. Mm-hmm. Whereas we know that every child is unique. Research has shown that children develop at different paces, at a different pace. They have different aptitudes, and they are ready to learn certain skills at different points in their lifetime.
Sure.
And homeschoolers try and accommodate children for that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What schools do is that they have a kind of an assembly line education where children are put through school almost like in a factory. Mm-hmm. A can of soup might be put through. Mm-hmm. And the teacher's role is to make sure that this happens over the grades with minimal interference from any outside forces. Mm-hmm. And often the curriculum is set by somebody far away from the situation, who has no knowledge of the child who is being taught that lesson.
That first-hand experience of the psychology of the child, in other words.
Psychology and his mental readiness to actually start learning as well.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that the emotional level or the emotional intelligence of where a child finds him or herself at is interfered with in the mainstream school level? If the child is put down or told you're not clever enough, you're not going to make it, what does it in fact do to the emotional state of a child?
Absolutely. If a child sees that he cannot read when his friend can read, or do maths or whatever, he might feel that he's stupid. Mm-hmm. And it will definitely affect his self-esteem, and it will affect his future learning.
Absolutely.
Whereas if it were known to him that at some stage in his life, he'll be ready to then learn how to read or how to do maths or whatever, and he can do something else in the meantime, which is also a learning experience. He might want to explore other parts of his life and then come back to the academics later on. And then he will be much more confident about his learning once he gets to that level.
And it makes a lot of sense. Can you explain for myself and the viewers, for what reasons do parents choose homeschooling?
Parents choose
that you have come across, sorry.
Yes. Parents choose homeschooling for many reasons. Some parents choose homeschooling for religious reasons because they want to bring up their children according to their own values. Some parents choose homeschooling because their children might have learning barriers or learning difficulties and they cannot cope in a class. What might happen sometimes is a child might be diagnosed ADHD, for example, and he's advised to go on medication. Some parents are not too comfortable with that, so then they look at other options for their child, and then they would, for example, end up homeschooling them. But I think the main reason why parents home educate is for educational reasons. They just feel that they can do a better job of it at home.
And on this particular point, does a person need to have a particular qualification to be able to homeschool?
That's actually a very interesting question and a very common question as well, because many moms who homeschool or who want to homeschool would feel inadequate because they are not qualified. They don't have that piece of paper which says you can now teach. But if you think about it, children learn up to almost half of what they ever learn in their life by the time they are 4 to 5 years old. And
that's at home.
And that's when they are under their mother's care. Because children learn naturally.
Sure.
It is actually surprising why mothers suddenly feel that they can't educate their children once they are 6 or 7 years old. Research has shown that homeschool kids who are actually taught by a mom who is unqualified versus those whose mom is qualified or who has a degree actually perform at almost the same level.
Sure.
So there is no real need for the qualification. There is just one thing I want to mention. Sometimes a qualification as a teacher can be a disadvantage for the mom because she will probably start homeschooling as if it's a school. And pretty soon she'll realize that it doesn't work at home. And she'll then have to unlearn what she's learned at university or in her degree, and then relearn a new method of homeschooling. And that can take about 18 months or so to realize.
Can you give us an example of what you are explaining to us?
A personal example is what happened to my wife, because she is a qualified teacher. And when she began homeschooling, she went to a mom in Mafeking who was homeschooling. And this mom was using Brainline. It's a school-like syllabus, a formal curriculum. And my wife said, fantastic, I'll order Brainline and I'll do it. However, in a home situation, if you are teaching every single subject to each different child, at that time, my two eldest children were in primary school. And she was getting burnt out, and so were they. And then after about 2 months, she was burnt out already.
Sure.
And then after about 6 months, she went to a more informal curriculum.
Okay. And that entails what? How did she make it more informal? What did she do differently?
Oh, okay. What she chose to do is because she felt that she needs to stick to the maths and the languages, she wanted them to be on par on those subjects. She made sure that they used the textbook material for Afrikaans, English, and mathematics. And then we bought a curriculum called Footprints on Our Land. It's actually a very interesting curriculum because it is nothing like what you would find in a school system. It's actually based on novels. So the people who devised Footprints on Our Land chose novels written for children, which were covering historical events. So there was one novel which was, for example, covering a boy who was on the ship of Bartholomew Dias. And there might have been a story of a boy who was of a San and a Khoi background. And then she read these to them. So they learned history incidentally, rather than from a boring textbook with a list of facts.
In a very formal mannerism. So again, the aptitude, the type of personalities that the children had was suitable now to the method that your wife was using, in other words.
Yes, she had them assessed as well.
Okay.
And she found that the one child is more right brain and the other one is more left brain. So she was accommodating them both through these novels. And also what happened is with these novels, the children were then learning geography because there were stories about ships moving through different continents, as well as science because they spoke about navigation in these books. So the other subjects, science, geography, history, were integrated in a much more exciting and a much more fun manner.
And a manner that is more approachable to children. If you think of the fact, it's almost like we're listening to a story, and that is exactly what captures the imagination of a child. So it makes a lot of sense, and it is very exciting. If you think, for me, that as a layperson not exposed to it, the fact that it's almost in a storytelling way, but it's facts that they're actually busy learning.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that the children actually began to enjoy books, and they began to enjoy to read. And that's something which we didn't expect from them.
Which is a plus point.
And also, we use those books as an English lesson too, because they were then supposed to tell back to her what they learned verbally. Okay. So it helps them to form language, to do it logically, which then prepares them to then write essays later in their school career.
Fantastic. It's wonderful to hear that the homeschooling system indeed, depending on obviously the person that's going to teach, the mother or the other spouse, the father that can get involved, is to know your child. And inshallah, after the break, if you can tell us where parents can go to have their children assessed so that it can support them in this process. We're going to elaborate on this topic after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A warm welcome back to Muslima Insight. In today's program, we are unpacking homeschooling with Shiraz Gur, who is sharing with us his expertise in this field and also from personal experience. Shiraz, before the break, you mentioned about having your children assessed in your personal journey of your wife homeschooling the children. Where can the parents take their children if they want to have them assessed to see what is most suitable, which learning method or teaching method is most suitable for their children?
I would recommend the website of Kobus Neertlang. It is called solutionsfinding.com, and you pay online and you can have each child assessed.
Fantastic. And coming to now looking at what are the benefits, what are the advantages of having your child homeschooled?
There are many benefits of homeschooling your child. I think the main benefit is that you have control. You have control, for example, of the contents of the curriculum. You are not obliged to use a school curriculum. You can suit the curriculum to what the child requires. You can also control the timing of when each topic is learned by the child. If you see a child is ready to learn to read, and then you would then start with that. If you feel that he is not very interested, then you hold back a while, for example. And then the other control you have is a control of the method of the homeschooling. We are well aware that that our state school system has gone through OBE and then NCS and now CAPS. Obviously, they're all different methods and they all have their uses. In a home environment, you can choose among those or any other method which you can find, see what works for the child. If it doesn't work, you leave it and try something else. That is what education is actually all about.
For sure. And tell me, for parents that are now perhaps watching the program, thinking that, this is an option they want to consider, where do they start? Where do they go to say, we want to do this? So where can they apply? Where do they get the material from?
The best thing is to actually start Googling.
Okay.
There is lots of information available on the internet. Read about homeschooling, read about the methods of homeschooling. read about the philosophy of the homeschooling. You can also join it's an email group called Thuis Onderwijs. It's Afrikaans for home education. And it has over 1,000 homeschoolers who regularly post information via email, and parents ask questions. If they have difficulty with their own home education, they ask for advice. And other mothers or fathers who have been through similar problems would then advise as well. So in other words, there is plenty of information out there.
What comes to mind is you're referring the parents to go and Google. Can you give us some service providers that are reputable, that parents can know it is safe to approach these particular institutions for the homeschooling curriculum, etc., that it's not a charlatan or a fly-by-night that's going to just perhaps take their money or that type of scenario?
The thing is that the parents must actually spend money after they have done the research. Most parents end up just buying the first curriculum which they see. I would recommend that they first inquire about homeschooling. They are most welcome to contact me. I would recommend that they contact the Pestalozzi Trust, which is the legal defense fund for home education. And they will help you legally in terms of your homeschool journey, and they also will provide you with information about homeschooling. There are also associations for homeschooling. They have websites, and they will also provide you with information. I would suggest that before any parent goes and purchases a curriculum, they do their research, because research has shown that most parents scrap the curriculum which they bought initially, mostly because it was too formal and also because it doesn't work for their children.
Sure. So your starting point after deciding you want to do this, would you say, okay, they look at the different systems, go and do their investigation, and in that they also obviously have to go and have the child assessed before they then, would you say that is a safer method to do, to see, we assess the child, this is the child's aptitude, this is what is most suitable, and then go and make an informed decision?
I wouldn't say that assessing in the beginning is that important.
Okay.
It is a very useful tool. But I think the main thing is to observe your child and to know him.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Coming to the curriculum itself, is that curriculum, does it necessarily work within a home environment?
No, a school curriculum, unfortunately, does not always work in home environment. If you think of way of the curriculum, it is devised by certain specialists who choose certain information from this huge body of knowledge which we as mankind have over the years accumulated. They choose a very small percentage of this body of language, of our body of knowledge, and then they determine what will be taught when. And often they do it very far removed from the child.
Sure.
So often we find in homeschooling is that children do not easily take kindly or they don't take kindly to being taught in a formal system. They want to have some freedom in what they want to learn and when they want to learn it.
Sure, and how are they going to learn it? Like we said earlier about, it's almost like a storytelling in the method that your children learned, and it covered all the various topics. So it is obviously important that the curriculum or the product that you're going to buy is going to be suitable. And tell me, is the syllabus then, what are the differences between what you would find? Does it cover all the subjects, but like we are discussing in a different format? And do you get through the same syllabus perhaps in a faster time, or would it take you longer?
That depends on actually how you do homeschooling. There are some parents who follow a very formal system and they would cover all the school subjects, whereas many parents choose to use the informal system, which I was speaking about earlier on. And then there are parents who don't follow any curriculum at all, and they let the child learn naturally, and they let the child direct education. Obviously, when we come towards university acceptance, and then that's where parents make a choice on whether they will follow a curriculum or not.
Mm-hmm. In what you have said is, do homeschoolers then write tests? Do they write exams? How do they go from one year to the next year? And where do they write tests and exams, if that is the case?
Homeschoolers generally do not write tests in the early grades because the parents know how well the kids are doing, mm-hmm. and they don't find a need for those tests. Mm-hmm. However, for those parents who want the tests, there are various curricula which are actually available which do provide the tests. What we did is that we began worrying about exams and tests only when our children were planning to go to university, and then we had to choose a system, mm-hmm. Which they had to follow, which will give them a matric or a equivalent to a matric. Mm-hmm. There are some homeschoolers students who don't want to go to university because mm-hmm. they already start with their careers when they're in the teens, mm-hmm. and they feel that a matric and a university will just waste their time, and mm-hmm. they would then write a very simple exam, which is challenging but simple to study for. It's called GED, mm-hmm. and that gives them a matric equivalent recognition.
Okay, fantastic. And let's say a child and the parents embark on this journey of homeschooling their child, and maybe after a year or a couple of months they realize this is not for us. Will the schools then accept those children back into the mainstream schools?
Yes, I did mention that it's important that all homeschoolers join the Pestalozzi Trust, mm-hmm. which is the legal defense fund for home education. Mm-hmm. And this trust will actually help you to get your child back into school. Mm-hmm. Schools are actually obliged to accept your child as per the year they were born. So, for example, if your child is turning 9 this year, then he has to go into grade 4, for example, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. grade 3. Okay, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The only snag is that it might be difficult to get your child in into a school in his grade 10 year, because the schools demand that they have the GETC certificate. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it shouldn't be a problem. Of course, we know when it comes to private schools, they will accept your child as long as you're able to afford the fees.
Of course, of course. And on that note, it is time for us to once again to go to a short break. Don't go away. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A warm welcome back to Muslima Insight. Today we are unpacking homeschooling. Shiraz, coming back to the topic of the different qualifications and the different systems within homeschooling, if a child wants to go to university, is there a particular exam that they need to then write from within a homeschooling environment and system that will be accepted by the universities?
Yes, there is, Adila. They can choose to do a matric via correspondence. Mm-hmm. My children chose to do Cambridge via correspondence. Well, my eldest son did that. My second son is doing Cambridge actually on his own because that was his choice. Mm-hmm. I found the Cambridge system to be better because it prepares them better for their studies at university. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also with the Cambridge system, it was easier because there is no portfolio or year mark which they have to prepare for throughout the year and submit. There is only a final exam. Mm-hmm. Also with Cambridge now the rules have changed where you can actually split your exams over different sittings. Okay. So you can actually cover the subjects at different points over 2 years.
Which is quite fantastic in the sense that it gives the child enough time to prepare, to make sure he's got sufficient knowledge to then write that paper. And that is really very exciting for the parents out there to know that this system is available. Coming to a completely different aspect pertaining to homeschooling, what about sports activities? Cultural activities. The social aspect we're going to touch on after this. When it comes to sport in particular, what can homeschoolers do?
Homeschoolers can actually contact local clubs in the area, and they can let the kids join them. They might have these clubs might have training. They might have tournaments. They can also look at certain cultural activities, for example, chess. If they are open to music, and then the kids can learn to play instruments and so on. And there is plenty available for homeschoolers.
So it's obviously, again, what you as a parent and with your child choose to go and do and venture into. Coming then to a very important aspect that I'm sure many parents worry about is the social aspect, socialization, because we are social beings. Wherever we go, there is that social interaction with other people. Does homeschooling not cause children to become more isolated?
I think that there is a perception that homeschoolers are at home all the time and they don't meet people. But actually, homeschoolers do meet other people through their sporting activities, for example. They often meet their friends over weekends. And they also have an opportunity to meet adults because they could work, for example, part-time in their parents' businesses. They could also in their high school years get a part-time job, especially in a field which will interest them. So homeschoolers socialize differently. They socialize with people of all ages, which is more a kind of a real-world environment rather than socializing with people of their own age.
And that, in a nutshell, is again another advantage because it puts them in the real adult life and exposure to that. Coming to your specific center that I believe is in Kyalami, if I'm correct.
That is correct.
EduSpaces, it is a support center for homeschoolers and obviously those who are homeschooling. What exactly do you offer?
I offer support to homeschool children. It could be support daily or it could be support once a week if the parents want that. Often parents can't homeschool their children and they would want the outside support. And I would actually work with those children and assist them with their homeschool journey.
And tell me, is your center open to children that are in mainstream schools as well?
Yes, most certainly. Mainstream school children can actually come there as well for homework support, for extra tuition, for matric booster sessions. And obviously I would offer tuition as well to the homeschoolers as well. And
tell me, university students, we mentioned that you have a publishing company as well, and obviously with the type of literature, the educational journey that you've walked, can you assist university students that perhaps need that extra help?
Yes, they are most welcome to contact me. I can provide tuition for them. They are most welcome to come study at my center because I'll have Wi-Fi available, so they could obviously Google their answers or Google their questions to get answers and information which they require for their studies.
Can you kindly give us your contact details, perhaps your website, as well as a contact number?
Yes, my work phone number is 011-702-3332, and my website address for the publishing company is www.knowledgethirstmedia.co.za. I am still busy with my web designer to add on information about my educational support center, EduSpaces. So that'll be up in the next few weeks as well. However, they are most welcome to even email me. It's siraj@knowledgethirstmedia.co.za. And then I could send them more information.
Can I just ask you your name? Can you just spell it out for our viewers so that they don't make a spelling mistake?
Oh, it is spelled Siraj.
Perfect. And just some closing statements from your side with regards to the success that you've reaped with your own children. If you would please share that with the viewers.
I think success is something which we in homeschooling, is something which you can only see when the children are into their adult lives. And I think that applies to children who go to school as well. We could measure success in terms of, yes, they have passed, they have passed matric. My eldest son finished his matric Cambridge at the age of 16 years old, and now he's doing 3rd year engineering. And my second son is doing his matric on his own. But I can only measure their success when they are in their adult lives and actually in their careers. And the research which has been done on homeschoolers in America, because homeschooling is very well established in America, is based on homeschool children who are now adults and working. And they have found that those adults in general are actually much more entrepreneurial than those adults who were schooled. They generally have more qualifications, and they are generally more involved in the communities and in society than the adults who were schooled in normal schools.
So we can clearly see that there are great advantages in later life as well, that these children are almost more rounded off. Would you say that within the mainstream schooling system, these certain social aspects, these peer pressures that children go through, that it causes almost like a stumbling block or a slower growth in these aspects of being able to step out in the real world at a younger age? I mean, your child qualified with matric at the age of 16. He's a 3rd year student. So obviously he is ready for adult world due to the fact that he was homeschooled. Would you say that the challenges within the mainstream schools can stunt this type of development?
Yes and no. I think parents, again, have a big role to play. Even if a child is at school, how parents raise their children will actually influence their kids in a very big way. You can actually have parents who actually stunt their kids' growth, whether they are schooling or homeschooling.
Of course.
And there are parents who can actually make their children fly, whether they are schooling or they're homeschooling. Homeschooling just simplifies things because you are in control. You are in direct control of the education, and you have less outside issues which you have to deal with.
Shiraz, can you tell me what advice do you have for parents that are interested in this or that are in it already?
From my experience, I would tell the parents to actually know their children well and to respect their interests and to acknowledge them, even if they don't turn out the way you want them to turn out. And to let the child determine his own learning and his own career.
Very, very well said. Indeed, we can see that we as parents, we have that imanat. Our children is a trust in our hands. And with that comes that responsibility to raise them and to nurture them in a way that builds their character, builds their value system. And of course, it is something that is not just a responsibility, but it's something that we're going to be answerable for. So we can see that within homeschooling, it is really truly a whole being that is being developed. It's not just the education, the emotional aspect is also looked after. The character is also looked after. So would you say that from that perspective, would you recommend that to others out there?
Yes, I would recommend homeschooling to others, on the proviso that you do it properly. Don't bring school at home, and allow your child to be. And in that way, it can be a success. Otherwise, you are basically repeating the same mistakes which schools are making.
So there is a great component, would you say, of discipline that has to take place when you are engaging in homeschooling?
In discipline, I would say that make sure that your child is responsible. He can do household chores. He can perhaps start a part-time business. And in terms of education and learning, that must come from within him. If that's forced upon him, I don't see that as being discipline. I see that as killing his flame and not fanning it.
Not fanning it, not letting the child grow. And once again, we have run out of time. I thank you for coming through. I think it has truly broadened many of our viewers' horizon on what homeschooling is, what can be achieved with it. And inshallah, may we take the time, if we do embark on this, to stay committed. However, like Shiraza says, not to close the flame, but to allow the child to foster and to grow to his or her full potential. From myself, Adila Ahmad, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.